Welcome back to schedule preview videos. We already did Ohio State. We just did Texas. And as you can tell by my hat, today we are looking at my favorite team, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, last year was a little bit disappointing for Alabama. They went 9-3. Now, normally 9-3 wouldn't be that disappointing, but if you're Alabama, 9-3 is disappointing. And it's not just 9-3, it's two of the teams Alabama lost to. One of the three teams Alabama lost to was kind of expected, Tennessee, who finished in the top four of the SEC and went all the way to the playoffs. The other two were not so good, Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Both of those two teams went 6-6. Alabama was a lot better than what the record was, but they also didn't play to how good they actually were. A lot of that was different factors. Kalen DeBoer being a first-year SEC coach with a quarterback that matched what his style never really was. A lot of it had to do with changing out with almost 50 players from 2023 that were not on 2024's team. A reshuffling in the deck of the SEC. But there's still some stuff that was inexcusable. Like, for example, Jalen Milroe, a running quarterback who isn't really designed to throw the ball 50 times in a game. But you look at the games where Bama lost, it was most of those games where Jalen Milroe was dropping back almost 50 times a game trying to throw the ball. Alabama has to clean that up in 2025 if they want to still be considered consistent playoff contenders. Now this year, Kalen DeBoer's in his second year. I think he's going to be better in his second year. He always is better in his second year. Look at him in Fresno State with his second year, how good he did. Look at him in his second year at Washington, where he led Washington to the national title game. This year's shaping up to be a better year for Alabama this year. And I think in year two of Kalen DeBoer, it's going to be better for Alabama. Now, the biggest loss for Alabama is at the quarterback position with the aforementioned Jalen Milroe. Alabama fans have mixed opinions on Jalen Milroe. Some of Alabama's fans aren't necessarily big on Jalen Milroe. Others love Jalen Milroe and think if he would have been utilized better, Alabama would have been better in 2024. I'm in the latter group. I think if Jalen Milroe would have been utilized better, and I think it's really just more of the timing, because if Kalen DeBoer, if DeBoer would have realized it, he would have been able to utilize Milroe probably better. But Jalen Milroe, the biggest two things is A, his deep ball accuracy is one of the best in the nation, and B, his escapability, which in terms of one of Alabama's biggest weaknesses in 2024 was offensive line. A mobile quarterback helps to be able to disguise it, and I think Jalen Milroe helped to disguise how weak the offensive line was. This year, Alabama doesn't have the luxury because Jalen Milroe is gone. The assumed starter for Alabama in 2025 is going to be Ty Simpson. He's got a good deep arm. He's accurate with the ball, but he's not an escapable quarterback. If Ty Simpson would have been behind that offensive line, there would have been a lot more sacks and probably more losses. So the offensive line really needs to improve for Alabama a lot in 2025 if Alabama is going to be a serious SEC contender and a serious playoff contender. Now, Alabama does also have some key additions, the biggest one being one of Miami's leading wide receivers from last year. Alabama also does have a lot of good talent returning. Jeremy Bernard, who is the second best wide receiver on the team. Ryan Williams, who may very well be the best wide receiver in college football. Jam Miller's returning at the running back position, and most of the defensive players from last year are returning. Kalen DeBoer does also bring back his offensive coordinator that he had at Washington that helped lead the Michael Penix offense. Ryan Grubb, who last year was the offensive coordinator in Seattle, he's coming to Alabama to help out Kalen DeBoer. So we'll see how much of an impact that has on Alabama's offense. Now let's look at Alabama's 2025 college football schedule. The first game for Alabama is going to be on August 31st, and it is going to be on the road at Florida State. This is actually going to be a home-and-home series. Basically, how that works is that they play each other 2 years in a row with switching out home games. This year, Florida State gets it at home. Next year, Alabama gets it at home. So this year, Florida State gets the game at home. Florida State was probably the worst Power 5 team last year. They went 2-10. They weren't even in the contention to win most of the games last year. Do you fall from 13-0 regular season to 2-10 regular season? I, like many people, am seriously doubting Mike Norvell as a good head coach. He used the portal once, did really well with it, 13-0. He tries it again, and almost everybody flops. And yet again, he went to it again this year. Now, granted, he probably did need to get some transfer portal players, but again, when is he going to learn from his mistakes? The transfer portal and overloading on the transfer portal isn't always your best option. You need to recruit. Now, I'm not saying don't completely disregard the transfer portal, right, Clemson? But you also need the transfer portal. You also can't overload on the transfer portal. Because, yeah, you'll get like a 13-0, 10-win season every once in a while. But what happens when they all strike out? But anyway, Alabama, not too really worried about this game, especially since Alabama has 8 months to prepare. And if you give Alabama 8 months to prepare with a talented team like that, they'll find a way. Then after Florida State, Alabama has 2 consecutive home games against non-con opponents. Starting with UL Monroe, this is in 2007, and the team hasn't been mismanaged for over a decade, so I think Alabama should be able to run through it. And in Wisconsin, I'm off the Luke Fickell hype train. I don't think it's going to work out for him. I think he's going to be gone after this year. So the first 3 games shouldn't really present much challenge for Alabama. Then you get your first bye week, and after that, you have to go on the road to your toughest opponent in 2025, the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, last year, Alabama won it in the last minute in a game where they were up 30-7 at one point, but then ended up needing a miracle. This year, the game is at home for Georgia. This game is probably the hardest to predict simply because just when you think Alabama's going to lose is when Alabama wins. Just when you think Georgia's going to lose is when Georgia wins. But important factor here is that it's at home for Georgia. Alabama hasn't played in Georgia since 2015. Sorry, guys. This should be one of the most interesting games in the SEC in 2025. If you think of the most interesting games of the SEC in 2025, you probably say Georgia versus Texas, number 1, and Georgia versus Alabama at number 2. It's going to be interesting to see, can Alabama keep winning against Georgia when you don't expect it, or will Georgia finally buck the trend? That's going to be the storyline going into the game. Can Alabama win it? They definitely can. But the same can be said from Georgia. Georgia definitely can. 2 teams that this game is going to dictate probably the outcome of the season. Then after Georgia, you then go back home and you play Vanderbilt, one of the 3 revenge games. This year, the game is at home for Alabama, which I think is going to make a difference. Last year, Vanderbilt benefited from Alabama going on the road after a tough home game. This year, it's the opposite. Alabama's coming back home after a tough road game. So I think this is going to I think Bama should be in a good position where Vanderbilt's not benefiting from Alabama being on the high after an emotional road game. Then after that, you go on the road to Missouri. Um, Missouri, I'm predicting them to fall off a little bit this year. They've done okay the past couple years, but this year is going to be a little bit tougher for them. And I think Bama shouldn't have much to worry about in this game, other than the fact that it is a road game in Missouri. But then after that, you get the toughest two-game stretch on the schedule for Alabama, because you get at home against Tennessee, followed by on the road at South Carolina. Tennessee last year beat Alabama on the road. Nico Iamaleava is returning for Tennessee this year. I think they've got Nico is going to be the key to success for Tennessee this year. They relied a lot on their running back last year, who got them a lot of success. This year he's gone, so Nico's going to have an increased role with the team. The game is in Tuscaloosa this year, not in Knoxville, and it favors Alabama a little bit more than it does Tennessee. But Tennessee is also one of those teams that can sneak you if you're not careful. And so Alabama's going to have their hands full with this game. In fact, I think there's really two home games Alabama really needs to worry about, and Tennessee is one of those two teams. So definitely watch out for that one. And then after that, you have to go on the road to South Carolina. South Carolina, a lot of people argue, should have been given a more serious look for the playoff last year. They nearly beat Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium last year. This year, Alabama has to go to William Brice Stadium for South Carolina. And on top of that, they're keeping Norris Sellers, their quarterback. Most of the offensive staff and players are returning. Can Shane Beamer keep that team consistent? Is going to be the MO of 2025 for South Carolina. Shane Beamer's been inconsistent so far. Can he finally get that team consistent? We saw last year them have a great run and then losing the bowl game. Can Shane Beamer somehow find a way to bring the best out of South Carolina this year? And if that's the case, Bama is going to have a really tough time against South Carolina this year. Fortunately, after the South Carolina game, you get your second bye week of the season, and then you follow that up with a home game against LSU. I said earlier there's two home games that Alabama has to worry about a lot this year. Tennessee being the first one, LSU's the second one of them. Garrett Nussmeier returns for his second year. We all know how difficult to stop second-year quarterbacks for LSU can be. We saw it from Joe Burrow in 2019. We saw it from Jaden Daniels in 2023. And we may very well see it from Garrett Nussmeier in 2025. On top of that, LSU has a loaded roster. They had the number one transfer portal class last year on top of a really good recruiting class. They always recruit very well. The question is, can it all finally come together in year 4 of Brian Kelly? That's going to be the key. There's been years where you can argue LSU was only good because of Brian Kelly. And there's also been an equal amount of years where you can argue that LSU was held back by Brian Kelly. Can Brian Kelly finally break through that glass ceiling in the SEC? He did beat Alabama in his first year, but that was with Alabama on the road. And then last year, Alabama went on the road to play LSU and dominated LSU. Can Brian Kelly find a way to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium and get LSU an upset over Alabama? I don't know if that can necessarily happen. He has the talent, but can he beat Alabama? He's done it before, but he hasn't come close to since. And then not to mention, that crowd is going to be rocking. It's probably going to be a primetime game unless one of these two teams falls off badly. And then following that one, Alabama has their third revenge game at home against Oklahoma. All the revenge games for Alabama are going to be at home. Oklahoma coming to Tuscaloosa, which I don't remember if they ever did. There's a lot of trouble brewing in Norman, Oklahoma. Brent Venables hasn't worked out nearly as good as they hoped. Jackson Arnold got ran off. He's now at Auburn. No clear indication of who the quarterback's going to be. And Oklahoma, I don't really have a lot of high expectations for them. They have the worst schedule in the SEC. They're coming to Alabama this year on top of their other opponents. I don't really think Oklahoma's going to have a good season. Now, that doesn't mean they could come to Tuscaloosa and give Alabama a challenge. But this year with the game at home instead of being in Norman, Oklahoma, that's going to make a lot of difference. And then you finish up with 2 consecutive home games. One of them being Western Illinois. Not a lot to talk about there. And then finally on the road against Auburn. Oh boy. I know a lot of you are probably laughing, saying Auburn's going to be terrible. And that may very well be the case. But that doesn't that doesn't mean that the Auburn game is going to be easy. And there's one reason why I say that. It's on the road at Auburn. Let's look at the past decade when Alabama goes to Jordan-Hare Stadium. 2013, kick 6 is all I really have to say. Now, 2015, Alabama did what they needed to do in Jordan-Hare Stadium. However, 2017, Bama was undefeated going into Jordan-Hare Stadium with Auburn having 2 losses, and Auburn kind of dominated. And keep in mind, that was the same year Alabama snuck into the playoff and won the title. Their one loss was to Auburn. Then in 2019, Alabama fighting for their lives, trying to secure a New Year's Six spot, keep their hopes alive for a playoff spot. They go into Jordan-Hare Stadium and lose by 3 to an Auburn team who already had 4 losses. Then in 2021, Alabama had secured a spot in the SEC title game, fighting to keep their playoff spot alive. Bryce Young was there, and he won the Heisman that year. And Alabama needed 4 overtimes to beat an Auburn team that went 6-6. 2023, Alabama was secured their spot in the SEC title game again, trying to keep their spot in the playoff hopes alive. Nick Saban was still there. Loaded team. The same team that ended Georgia's 29-game winning streak. And Alabama needed 4th and 31. A miracle on 4th and 31 to beat Auburn. Strange things happen when Alabama plays Auburn on the road. And it's not just Alabama that struggles in Jordan-Hare. Look at Georgia. LSU in some cases has struggled a lot in Jordan-Hare. It's the environment of Jordan-Hare Stadium that keeps even the worst Auburn teams in play. So I think it's going to be a difficult game. Don't be surprised if Alabama needs to pull out another miracle to beat Auburn in Auburn. So there you go. Alabama's 2025 schedule. I think Alabama goes anywhere from 9-3 to 11-1. I don't think they go 12-0. But I think you have possible losses on the schedule. Georgia on the road, South Carolina on the road, Tennessee at home is definitely a possible loss, and LSU at home is a possible loss, although I don't think you lose both of those 2. I think if you somehow lose one of them, you're not going to lose the other. And definitely South Carolina might still be a little bit winnable. Georgia too. I mean, you can't count on Alabama against Georgia, but there's definitely some difficult games on that schedule, especially when you consider that you have the 2-game stretch where you have to play Tennessee at home, followed by South Carolina on the road. Now, Georgia, you do get the benefit of a bye week, as well as LSU getting the benefit of a bye week. Most likely, I think Alabama goes 10-2. But anyway, that's Alabama's schedule preview for 2025. I'm going to go ahead and step out of the SEC because I just did Texas, did Alabama, so that's 2 consecutive SEC teams. I'm going to go ahead and look at a team from a conference I haven't looked at yet. Let's go into the ACC and look at the Clemson Tigers.